In 2001, my dad and my stepmom were murdered. They were murdered by my stepbrother and a few of his friends. And the crime was brutal. My stepbrother pled guilty to all of his charges, so he's in prison without the possibility of parole. And his friend Landon May was ultimately given the death penalty. I met Landon May's family, and that was pretty instrumental in concretely nailing down how I feel about the death penalty, because I so clearly understood what it felt like to lose a loved one, and this group of women that I met were also at risk for losing a loved one.
What led me to working on abolition in particular is my school hosted an event where some prisoners were brought to the school to speak to us. One of the prisoners described the incredible stench from the burning flesh that permeated the prison. And that was using the electric chair at that time. So I was sitting there, 12 years old, aghast to hear this, thinking, how could we possibly be doing this to other human beings? And it just stayed with me.
The realization that the legal system, the criminal justice system, can make mistakes. There have been over 130 exonerations off of death row in the United States since the mid-70s. We're the only nation in the Western world that has capital punishment.
Throughout the trials, they continued to say, this is for the victims' families, when very clearly we had said, that doesn't feel good to us.
Virginians don't want that death penalty if they're given an alternative. And so a group of us decided that we were going to do something about it. We were going to start this organization. Things started changing. The mood started changing.
VADP was largely a protest organization. They would do vigils, they would argue against the death penalty, talk at churches, so on and so forth. That changed when John Sheldon became chairman of the board. He wanted VADP that would do grassroots organizing, that would ultimately be able to lobby the General Assembly.
We were raising more money, and we hired a new executive director to try and build on the fantastic work that I would call the old guard did. The old guard worked against all the odds. They worked when there was a conservative General Assembly.
What kind of abolition work looked like in the 80s and in the 90s looked different than in 2008 and looks different than the past couple of years. And it's been such a fast, radical change. 2008, 2009, 2010 was not a time that we were thinking about abolition, but that's where we knew we wanted to go. And so anything that we did worked toward this very clear, focused goal.
A few years ago, when I was president of VADP, I was at a meeting with a moderate Virginia Democrat senator. I wanted to talk to this legislator after the meeting alone to just get a sense of where he was. And he looked at me after the meeting with no one else around and said, "It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen in your lifetime." He just told me I was wasting my time putting any energy into fighting the death penalty in Virginia. That was probably about 2017 or 18, not that long ago. Michael Stone was saying to me, the pieces are there, Ken, it's going to happen.
Although Michael Stone did have that goal. He said it at a meeting a few years ago, and I remember being like, oh, that's optimistic.
And I was looking back over the last 30 years and saying, I think it's going to almost happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. The joy from it was spontaneous and amazing. It's so rare to get this kind of huge victory.
One of the biggest factors were the people on the front line that are defending these cases successfully.
There were no new death sentences because the Indigent Defense Commission was able to get a budget and set up these dedicated, high-quality capital defenders.
Hadn't been a new death sentence in over a decade is huge. The fact that death row was virtually emptied out. But what I think was really momentous for this was George Floyd.
With the death of Black people at the hands of law enforcement across this nation, that finally made people step back,
Systemic racism in our country has made a lot of people pause and take a serious look at what's actually going on, because everything we know about how the death penalty is applied is part of a racist system.
It was a legal way to continue lynching black people, and there are still a disproportionate number of the people on death row in the South are people of color. And this is especially true if the victims are white.
Let's face it, we've been going through a reckoning with race generally in society and in the criminal justice system. I think you got a boost from the general consciousness about it.
In the same year that Stonewall Jackson's monument goes, the death penalty ends in the capital of the Confederacy. And it's going to happen throughout the remaining 12 states. The only issue is how many people we're going to allow states to kill.
Seeing men who society had written off at one time, who now have lives, and being able to see what they're doing with their lives, because they're contributing. They're valuable people. They're loved by their family. They have friends. They're accomplishing things. They're going to school. They're learning. They're improving themselves.
We've said for years, working together, that abolishing the death penalty is in some sense just the tip of the iceberg.
Most battles for civil rights and civil liberties are probably temporary. That doesn't mean they won't stay won, but you have to keep after them. You have to make sure there are no reversals in court. You have to make sure that legislators stay on top of these things.
We should definitely acknowledge this. This is a major accomplishment, but we can't rest. It's just getting started.
VADP started in 1991. Here we are, 2021. It's 30 years later, and this one organization lasted.
I was just very, very fortunate to serve with some incredibly dedicated and talented people. I don't think anybody thinks we could be where we are today, sitting here doing this interview about the abolition of the death penalty, if Steve Northup hadn't spent years stewarding VADP.
One of the most incredible things about being involved with VADP over those years is the people. I mean, people come to this work because they care and because they're passionate and they want to do the right thing.
This group has felt like an extension of family in a way that I wouldn't have expected.
It's easy doing advocacy in Virginia to think you'll never get to where you want to go, but that you're doing the right thing, the moral thing, by fighting for the cause you believe in. What VADP represents right now is that it's more than just hope and the right moral cause. You actually can get real victory, and this is an astonishing victory.
This is such an exciting, historic time. When I get older and grayer, I can tell my kids and my grandchildren that I was a part of this movement. I was an abolitionist. I fought for change. This was truly a labor of love for so many people. And thank you for making that happen, and thank you for being part of really making Virginia a more just place for future generations.
In Hebrew, we say kol hakavod, which means all the honor to you.
It didn't really happen all that suddenly. It happened because people like you supported this organization for decades and made your voices heard and stood up for what you felt was right. So your support was indispensable in making that happen, and I would just like to say congratulations.
Congratulations and fantastic work to everybody. We couldn't have done it, I am sure, without everybody that supports VADP. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job, VADP.
You have proved them wrong. You have stood up even when people said sit down. You've spoken even when people said be quiet. And that's why I know that what you have done is not just a first step, but it is a giant leap. My name is Bryan Stevenson, and I just want to add my voice in celebration of the extraordinary achievement that has taken place in Virginia through the abolition of the death penalty. For your leadership, thank you. For your continuing work, thank you. And for giving me this opportunity to express my gratitude, thank you.